Okay. Hi, welcome to Lunch and Learn. Today our presenter is Todd. He is going to be presenting on the subject of importing from Excel to FileMaker. Please feel free to add a comment or ask a question in our YouTube chat to be entered into a raffle for a restaurant gift card. This is going to be recorded, but without further ado, I'll turn it back over to Todd.
All right, thank you, Laura. So yeah, we're going to be talking about converting from an Excel spreadsheet to a different application to help us get our job done. As we know, there are a number of tools out there that businesses use to do the job, and the goal is to find the right tool for the job. And Excel or any spreadsheet application really is one of the main tools that almost every business uses, but there are some things that it doesn't quite do as well. So let me just go ahead and open up a sample one that we have here. And this is tracking trade show information. So as you see here, this one is the trade shows themselves. And we're tracking, we have an ID number, the name, the date range, the venue address, and a generic description. And then we also have a second tab down here that is tracking the exhibitors at a given trade show. Again, the name, the ID, as well as the sponsorship level for the exhibitor, the booth they've been assigned, and also some information about that company. So pretty standard stuff. It's not too complicated. Certainly if you were running an actual show, you would need something a little bit more, but this is good for our discussion points today. And one of the things that can be a problem is if you wanted to sort information in your Excel spreadsheet. We come over here, I'm going to do a custom sort. I'm going to pretend and select the wrong thing, go over here and do my sort, click OK because I didn't catch it. And what you'll see happen is that it did sort the information in that column, but now it's jumbled all the dates together. It didn't sort everything like it was supposed to. So that can certainly be a problem if you click Save before you go in and do your Control-Z to undo and get back or able to pull up a backup copy. Other things that we like to be able to track as we're doing information is to have pictures or other PDFs or things that go along with the information that's in that Excel file, and Excel doesn't really have a place for us to put that. So we want to look at another tool that we could potentially use. And so that brings us to a database application, which of course is designed to hold data. And what we have here is, before we get to that, let's quickly review the terminology. Okay, we're already looking at the spreadsheet here that has two tabs or two sheets, if you will. These are comparable to a table within a database file. Each table is going to hold information that is unique. Typically it's one kind of thing, but it holds a bunch of things, of course. And so again, this here is we have one for trade shows, one for the exhibitors themselves. As we drill into the sheet itself, we see each row here is describing one of those unique things. Here we have the different trade shows that were going on. So a row in a spreadsheet is a record within a database application. That's that unique thing that you're tracking within your table. And then that brings us finally to the rows, which are all of the attributes or the things that define, the characteristics define that thing that we're tracking within our system. So of course, the ID number and the name and the combination of dates make it unique. So we're describing, that thing. And so that's where these columns then become the fields that we're looking at within our database file. And that will become important as we start the conversion process. So I'm going to go ahead right now and go and close my Excel file. And I'm going to not save since I made some changes. And what I'm able to do to start this conversion process is just go ahead and grab my Excel file and drop it on the FileMaker Pro icon. That's the tool that we're going to use to create this database solution. And you can see that FileMaker has recognized that I'm not looking at a FileMaker file, but it is an Excel file, and it's recognized that there's two worksheets within that file, as well as a named range, so I can choose what I want to start with my conversion. And since we're focusing on the trade shows, I'm going to go ahead and let it select the default and click OK. We're just going to go ahead and let it be the name that it's currently selected by default there. Put it on the desktop. And this gives me a preview as we begin to convert the file. And what you'll see here is I've got some arrows that I can use up in the upper corner just to kind of scroll through and look at the data that I have. And it all looks good. Okay, so it's pulled in all of the rows that I had in my spreadsheet. But you'll notice over here we talked about how the column names are listed here, and they're going into the target fields within that database table. But they're just very generic, and that's not really going to be very helpful. But we do have a tool here that we're able to come back and select and say use those as field names. And so as we conduct this conversion, it's going to go ahead and take that first row or the column names and use those as the field names when it creates the database file for us, which is very helpful. So all the rest of that looks good. We can just go ahead and click the convert button, and then just in a couple minutes, it's revealed our now database file of that same information. And I know what you're thinking. You're saying that doesn't look a whole lot different than what you just showed us. And you would be correct, because FileMaker does two things when we do this conversion from a spreadsheet file, is it creates two layouts, and one of them is this layout which they call table view, and it's obviously very Excel-like. Now the advantage here is that there's some tools here to do some sorting very quickly, and as you see as I do that, whether I'm sorting ascending or descending, it's maintaining the integrity of each row or each record. So I don't have to worry about that like I had to do when I was working in Excel and making sure I had the full range selected before I did my sort. So that's something that's very helpful. Don't have to worry about. And so you have your table view. If you want to look for trends in data, you can still see that. But it's not always the best thing for doing data entry, because you need to track and make sure which line you're on. Of course, you're looking at all of the trade shows, where you're probably only going to be looking at information for one trade show at a time. And so that's where FileMaker comes in, and during this conversion, it also creates a second layout, which is right here, and it is this process data entry form, as we like to think about it. And so this is where we can start making some changes and to ensure that we're able to use the data the way that we want it and still get all of that information. So if we drop into layout mode again, which is just here under view, and we want to go into layout mode so that we can then start moving some things around. Obviously FileMaker has done some of the work for us. But there's a little bit more that we need to do, because it's just put the layout, these fields or our columns on our layout, and we want to make some adjustments. So the ID number, that's important, but it's something that's going to be auto-assigned, so we probably don't need to give it a place of prominence. So we can just go ahead and move it over here. Go ahead and make the name of the event, obviously, is going to be important, so we can just kind of bump it up towards the top. Another thing that's going to be important, of course, are the date ranges that we're working with. Just go ahead and move those over here, slide that down a little bit. And then, of course, the venue is another one of those things that's going to be important, that we want to be able to see all the time, give it a place of prominence on our layout as we're doing either data entry and changing that information, or some of the other related information. And as we talked about, we want to be able to see all of the information, but we don't want to go into information overload because there's just too much to look at. And that's where we're able to use a tabbed object, which is a common design pattern in a lot of different applications. So I can grab the tool from the status area there at the top, drag it down here onto my layout. It pops up the wizard, and I can start naming the tab. So of course we have the general information that we want to track, so we'll create a tab for that. One of the things that we talked about previously is that it's nice to be able to store a picture or some type of PDF along with the information that we have. So let's go ahead and create a tab for that, and we're just going to go ahead and call that picture. And then finally we want to be able to track our exhibitors. So we'll go ahead and create a tab for that, but we'll wait before we actually do anything with that, but we're going to go ahead and create the placeholder here now. And just because I like the looks, I'm going to go ahead and go with full justification so that it looks nice. And now I have my tab object on my layout here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the other items that haven't had anything done with them yet. I'm just going to go ahead and pull it over here onto this front tab of my tab object and then resize it. So I've quickly completed, so I'm getting closer to what I want to see. So if I now go into browse mode, and as I look through my data, I'm able to see that, okay, I'm starting to look like something that's going to be easy to use, intuitive to use, without getting lost in all of the other records as I'm looking at a particular trade show. But there's a little bit more that we can do with this layout. So we'll go ahead and go back into our layout mode, which again has the areas over here for adding our objects. We can also add a new field. And that's one of the things that we want to go ahead and do, because we talked about having a picture, but Excel really didn't have a place to put that kind of information. So just go ahead and add a new field. We're going to call it picture. And instead of being a text or a number or some kind of date field, we want to select the container field option from this drop down. And what a container field does, it allows us to store information that is a picture, an audio file, video file, a PDF. It could be an Excel file. It could be a Keynote file, or it could even be another FileMaker file. Pretty much any kind of binary data can be stored in some way within a container. Now we're going to use it for a picture, so that's what I'm going to name it, but we're not limited to just storing pictures. Switch over here to our picture tab. It went ahead and added that field to my layout for me automatically. So I'm just going to go over here, get it up on the tab where it belongs, and then resize the picture so it's nice and big, and I can see what's going on there. So now as I save that, go back into my browse mode so that I'm viewing the information. Now I've got a place to insert my pictures. So we're going to go ahead and unsort. Get back to our first record, and I've already got some pictures here in this little file folder. And you can do an insert through the tools, but it's just as easy to do a drag and drop. So I go to the second record and third record, and I'm able to add these pictures in very quickly and easily to my database. And have it be large enough that I can actually see what I'm looking at, especially if we would want to also add a copy of the floor plan for that particular thing. Now, one of the other things that I like to do is that obviously we have the name and the venue here that gives us some information about the item that we're looking at, but it doesn't jump right out at us to let us know. So we're going to go ahead and use what is called a merge field. We didn't look at this before, but we can do some things here with the appearance. So I'm going to go ahead and select this nice blue color because I like that blue color for my navigation menu here under this palette that I have on the right hand side of my layout. And I'm going to go ahead and insert some text. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that tool, get up here, draw my text box. And then what I want to insert is I'm just not going to put any text, as I want to make it dynamic for the record. So I'm able to go up here under Insert and insert a merge field. So it's treated as text, but it's dynamic for the record. And I'm going to go ahead and select the name. And I think it probably also makes sense to go ahead and put the location, because there may be similar trade shows or conferences that happen in multiple cities at different times throughout the year. So I'm going to go ahead and use the shortcut key to just get back to that menu very quickly. And I'm just going to add in city, comma, state. Okay. So that's a little better. So now if we just get a quick preview here. So we're getting closer, but still not quite happy with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead back to my palette here on the right hand side, up the font size just a little bit, make it white so that it stands out. And then one last thing I'm going to do is, because obviously the name of the event is probably the most important thing, I'm going to go ahead and increase its font a little bit, get it re-centered here. stretch that out. And now as I go into browse mode, you see that I've got a nice big indicator right up at the top, so there's no question as to what trade show I'm about to trade, either change information on, or when I go to look up the exhibitors once we get to that point here at a future Lunch and Learn, what I'm looking at. So I just like that. Now of course there are a few other things that we're able to do. Obviously we want to resize our description so that we can see that. The ID number probably doesn't need to be front and center, so we can go ahead and just put it on this tab, so we only get to it when we want to see it. And also we have here our city, state, and zip. That's very common, so people are going to know what that is, so we can just go ahead and resize these here a little bit, bring them up, and then we could probably go ahead and actually get rid of these labels, because when you see information arranged that way, we're programmed to know that that is an address, so we don't have to call out and label every single thing. So now we're looking, we've gotten closer to the end goal of having a database that we can use to now track our information instead of just using those Excel files. Now I'm going to use a trick here that they do on all of the cooking shows. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven for 30 minutes and pull out another copy here that I've done a little bit more formatting on, just so you can see where we can take it from here. And what you'll see is as I adjust the size of my layout, I have things that they're sliding, they're resizing, so I don't see any of that gray space along the edges. The spacing between fields and things like that is a little bit more crisp and consistent. And so there's a lot of things that you can do once you're in layout mode and working with the formatting palettes that are here on the right hand side to really fine tune your layout and make sure that things are looking well for you. So that is part one. So we've converted our trade shows now from a spreadsheet into a database that we can use. And so the next step, of course, is to now take that information that was in the exhibitors tab, get it over here and get it formatted in a way that it's adds value and helps us do our job better. Unfortunately, we're out of time for today, so that'll be our Appetizer Lunch and Learn next month, so you have to come back for part two. But there may be some questions, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Laura and see if we do have any questions.
Hi, Todd. Thanks.
Yep.
That was good. There's a few questions going on here. So let's start with the first one. Let's say once you import all the information from Excel to FileMaker, can the data within the fields be changed?
Definitely. It's going to inherit and try to make some logical assumptions when you do that conversion, that if it sees a column that looks mostly as numbers, it's going to define it as a number field. If it sees something that's obviously text, it's going to, or default to text really. But once that information is in there, you're able to edit and make, any changes that you need to, once the information is pulled in, especially because you may be converting from a system where the information's incomplete. And of course you want to go back and fill in the gaps if you had incomplete information in the Excel file that you were starting with. So yeah, you can definitely edit the information once you get it pulled into FileMaker.
Okay, great. So another question here. Notice that there's columns in the Excel sheet. Do you need columns to import it into Excel? Titles, I should say.
You do not. What would happen is, if you can recall back, we had where it just uses default field names F1 through whatever number of however many columns it sees. So you can always import with those generic names and then go back and actually rename the columns later. In fact, let me go back and just give a quick preview of that, or what that would look like. Because like I said, this here is our one that's we just pulled out of the oven. But if I go back into my layout mode, these are the names that the columns had when I pulled them in from Excel. I usually don't like to have spaces. FileMaker is very forgiving and allows spaces. That's just a personal preference. So I'm able to go in, and if I wanted to even change one of the column names that was pulled in, I'm able to make that change so that it fits, whether it's my naming convention or it's got a character that may not play well in calculations. I'm able to change that name and kind of forward proof the application as I start building it by making subtle changes like that. So
Okay, cool. And is there a certain order that columns need to be in for the Excel sheet?
There are not. You can have. I mean, it will, like I said, it will pick up and kind of look as far out to the right, if you will, of the spreadsheet to see how many columns are in use, as well as how many rows may contain data. So if there's gaps, but if it sees data down further, it will try to include all of those records. So it can be in any order, both record-wise or row-wise, if you will, to use the spreadsheet term, as well as the columns. Because once it's in there, you're able to move things around, as you saw as we're setting up our layout, so that if the address wasn't all grouped together, you could certainly move the fields around to make sure that the address is grouped together, or that the phone number fields are grouped together for your data entry. One thing that I did not show is you're also able to adjust the tab order on your layout so that as you're doing data entry, you have a logical progression of moving through each field.
Okay, very cool. I think we have time for one more question. And we use the Excel sheet, can there be any other formats that are imported into FileMaker?
Yes, you can import quite a number of those. Obviously, Excel being the primary one that's probably most common, but then also you can use like a CSV, which is a comma separated value format. You're also able to pull in custom separated values. So if you have a file that is tab separated or some other specialized character, you are able to import those as well. It does work with DBase files. Certainly you can import from another FileMaker profile as well. And you can use a merge file. Now the conversion process is not quite as seamless for some of those other styles as what we looked at today, but what we're going to get into for our next Appetizer Lunch and Learn is we are going to be creating a new table in an existing file using one of those import processes. So folks will get a chance to see what some of that looks like when you're doing an import, so you can create a new table or import into an existing table that you already have set up in your database solution.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it up a little bit.
Okay.
So first, I want to say thank you for Todd for presenting on this. And then also thank you for whoever is watching this. Glad to hear you here. If you like what you saw, click the thumbs up and share the video. And if you already haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. There's also the survey at the bottom of our description in which you can give some feedback or submit topics. You can also submit topics at our email at nutshell@crossit.com. And anyways, we are glad you're here and we're glad to have served you a lunch and learn.